28 long years, Norway watched the FIFA World Cup from the sidelines. Despite producing talented players, they couldn't make it back to football's biggest stage. Then came Erling Haaland, a goal-scoring phenomenon who helped reignite a nation's dream. Good morning, guys, and welcome to Flop Files. Let's dive right into this explainer and explore how the Norwegian national team transformed from an entirely invisible squad into a truly dangerous World Cup contender.
For decades, it felt like Norway was just trapped in this perpetual cycle of almost. They consistently produced really solid individual players, guys like John Arne Riis or John Carew, who absolutely thrived in top European leagues. Yet, as a collective unit trying to qualify for major tournaments, they just lacked that absolute catalyst for a revival. They were a team searching for an identity. Well, that is until a towering striker from tiny, unremarkable town in the southwest of Norway stepped onto the pitch and decided to just completely rewrite their history.
28. Just let the sheer weight of that number sink in. That is a painful 28 years spent in the footballing wilderness since their last World Cup appearance at France in 1998. Back then, Egil Olsen was the mastermind manager, Tore Andre Flo was leading the line, and they actually stunned a legendary Brazilian squad. But what followed? Nearly 3 decades of quiet disappointment. Entire generations of passionate Norwegian fans grew up, went to school, started families, and lived their lives having never once seen their country compete on the sport's biggest stage. It was a generational drought that hung over the national team like a heavy shadow.
But the contrast before and after this squad's evolution is literally night and day. Pre-Haaland Norway wasn't necessarily a terrible team, but they were largely harmless. And harmless teams in international football don't attract pressure, and they certainly don't command fear. Opponents could play a high line, press comfortably, and dictate the entire tempo. Norway would just survive, repeat the cycle, and disappear in the standings. But post-September 2019, suddenly Norway became wildly unpredictable. They transformed into a threat that altered the very geometry of how opponents had to play against them. Teams couldn't push up anymore. They had to respect the space in behind. To really understand why this shift was so drastic, we have to talk about what tacticians call the spacing effect. At 1.94 meters tall, possessing the sheer physical power of a target man but the terrifying acceleration of a winger, Haaland introduced a literal geometric anomaly to the pitch. Center backs began to track him obsessively, completely terrified of leaving him an inch of space. Fullbacks stayed much narrower to protect the middle. Defensive lines prioritized retreating over actually confronting the midfield. It was an incredible psychological advantage. Honestly, Haaland didn't even need to touch the ball to completely shatter the defensive shape and mindset of the opposition. And this spacing effect, it became the ultimate skeleton key for Martin Odegaard. With defenders constantly backpedaling just to manage the threat of a through ball to Haaland, massive pockets of space suddenly opened up in the midfield. Odegaard stopped having to react to broken, panicked plays while under heavy pressure. Instead, with all that central congestion cleared out, passing lanes appeared sooner and stayed open way longer. Given that extra second of time and 5 extra yards of space, Odegaard began completely dictating the rhythm of the game, linking the build-up and the attack as one beautiful, structured sequence. Now, to be fair, this epic comeback isn't just a two-man show. Over these years, Norway quietly cultivated a true golden generation. Yes, Haaland is the undeniable focal point at the top, but it's a beautifully balanced and deep squad all around. You've got the mercurial, dynamic dribbling talents of Oscar Bob and Antonio Nusa breaking down the wings. You have the elite playmaking and vision of Andreas Schildrope providing incredible depth. And then there's the physical, imposing presence of Alexander Surloth, who can just batter exhausted defenders late in a match. It all finally clicked into a cohesive, highly dangerous unit. Of course, evolutions like this rarely follow a straight line, right? Their resilience was tested time and time again, maybe never more so than during a crucial qualifier against Estonia. Norway went into the halftime break shockingly goalless. The home fans in Oslo were incredibly frustrated, literally booing and jeering as the players headed down the tunnel. It really felt like the old Norway creeping back in. But inside that locker room, Haaland provided absolute calm. He looked at the squad and simply said, "We'll fix this, boys. We are going to get that goal. We just have to keep going." And guess what? They did, sparking a massive, relentless 4-goal second-half comeback. Once this team truly clicked, their dominance was absolute. They didn't just casually scrape their way into the 2026 World Cup. They marched right through a super challenging group containing a traditional footballing giant like Italy. They amassed a perfect 24 points, winning all 8 of their matches. They finished 6 clear points ahead of the Italians and achieved a stunning plus 32 goal difference.
For a team that hadn't seen a World Cup in nearly 30 years, they didn't sneak in through the back door. No way. They kicked the front door wide open with an aura of total invincibility.
If you're enjoying this documentary, subscribe to Flop Files and share this video with a football fan. We uncovered the stories behind football's greatest moments and biggest comebacks. And speaking of incredible, logic-defying moments, part of that huge plus 32 goal difference was driven by a staggering, record-shattering 11-1 flattening of Moldova. In modern international football, double-digit scorelines in competitive qualifiers are practically unheard of, but Norway was utterly ruthless, burying chance after chance and flat-out refusing to take their foot off the gas.
To put that offensive firepower into perspective, out of the 37 goals Norway scored in just 8 qualifying matches, Erling Haaland was responsible for 16 of them. Just think about that raw output for a second. Averaging exactly 2 goals a game in international qualifiers is a stat line usually reserved for the absolute peak years of a Lionel Messi or a Cristiano Ronaldo. He served as the undisputed, unstoppable catalyst for securing that World Cup ticket. Defenses knew exactly what was coming. They spent weeks preparing for it, and they still couldn't stop him from finding the back of the net. All of this insane momentum culminated in a shattered record that had stood entirely untouched in Norway since 1937. With a brilliant brace against Slovenia in late 2024, Haaland officially broke Jurgen Juve's all-time scoring record. But he didn't just break it, he sprinted past it. By the time the Norwegian squad actually set foot in the World Cup tournament, Haaland sat at an astonishing 62 international goals in just 54 caps. He was averaging well over a goal a game for his country, and incredibly, he was doing the whole shebang at just 24 years old. So breaking the 28-year curse was huge, but surviving the pressure cooker of the global stage in North America, that was only half the battle. They advanced out of their group by handling Iraq with a 4-1 victory and surviving a thrilling 3-2 shootout against Senegal. And despite suffering a pretty heavy reality check 4-1 loss to France, they proved their newfound psychological resilience. Instead of collapsing, they immediately bounced back in the round of 32, grinding out a super hard-fought 2-1 victory over a very physical Ivory Coast team. Which sets the stage perfectly for the next massive hurdle, the ultimate test, Brazil in the knockouts. This was the absolute moment of truth at MetLife Stadium. Could Norway truly prove they belonged among the global elite? While the first half was incredibly frustrating, Norway set out to dominate but really struggled against the sheer technical brilliance of the South Americans. Haaland was largely a non-factor, completely suffocated by the Brazilian defense and restricted to very limited touches. At the hydration break, Coach Ståle Solbakken had a direct, intense talk with his star striker, basically telling him to just drain his energy and leave everything on the pitch. Then, at halftime, Solbakken made a massive tournament-defining gamble, a double substitution, bringing on Oscar Bob and Andreas Schjelderup. Solbakken later explained that tactical shift simply, saying, "It's a gut feeling that Oscar and Andreas might make a difference, and then you saw what happened. And wow, that gut feeling completely changed the complexion of the match. The sudden injection of raw pace and fearless dribbling stretched the field horizontally. It opened up the pitch, carving part of Brazilian side that suddenly found themselves scrambling and completely out of shape as they tried frantically to contain Norway's renewed attacking width." As the suspense built and the clock ticked down, the dam finally broke in those explosive final minutes. In the 79th minute, Schjelderup sent in a perfectly weighted cross, and Haaland rose into the air, delivering a towering dagger of a header, right above Gabriel Magalhães. The stadium absolutely erupted. But Brazil pushed hard for an equalizer, leaving big gaps at the back. As the game bled into the 90th minute, granted just a fraction of space on the edge of the penalty area, Haaland struck again, another brilliant assist from Schjelderup, firing a lethal shot right through the legs of Danilo. 2 late goals to secure a historic 2-1 victory. The sheer emotion pouring out of the team was perfectly captured by Haaland himself right after the final whistle. Exhausted but totally elated, he said, "Maybe this will write history in Norway. It's one of the most insane days in Norwegian history. Just enjoy it, embrace it, and enjoy the moment." And guys, it's hard to overstate the gravity of this achievement. They hadn't just returned to the World Cup after 28 years. They had sent mighty tournament favorite Brazil packing and marched into the quarterfinals for the first time in their nation's history. For nearly 3 decades, Norway dreamed of returning to the World Cup. With Erling Haaland leading a new generation, that dream finally became reality. The next chapter is no longer about qualifying. It's about proving Norway belongs among football's elite. Thanks for watching Flop Files.